What's up, y'all? Welcome back to Dolphins Daily, your daily dose of Dolphins content with your boy, Chris Kane. Let's talk about the Dolphins. So, we're going to play a new game today called Case or No Case. I've done versions of this before, but never an entire show where we're basically making the case for a trade or against a trade or for a draft pick or against a draft pick, right? Because I read, again, a lot of articles, a lot of things come to my feed, and I read some things, I'm like, why would they can't even make a reasonable case for that. And sometimes I'm like, oh, it's not a bad idea. So we're gonna play case or no case. The first one is should the Dolphins trade for Devonte Wyatt? He's a defensive tackle for the Packers. Entering the last year of his deal, I mentioned that a few episodes ago that sometimes people don't have to be free agents to be traded. They're in the last year of a deal. The team doesn't want to retain them and they don't want to pay them. And it's like, hey, if we can trade you and get a little bit, pennies on the dollar, then that's actually a good idea. We get asset back, we get rid of the player, everything's all good. So Devonte plays D tackle. He actually was pretty solid in the time he played last year. He had 5 sacks and 32 quarterback pressures, but he played almost half the snaps last year as he did the year before that because the Packers drafted and made moves on the D line. And basically, he kind of got pushed out. He's 27, last year of his contract. They are not going to re-sign him. So should Miami. And I think it makes a lot of sense. His skill set fits what we need. And 27 is a really good age. You would think he has between 4 and 5 years left of like legit prime. And given that he played basically half of last year, not because of injury, just he wasn't getting a lot of run. He's 27, but kind of 26. You start playing that math like, well, you didn't play a lot that 1 year, so we're going to just like table that year. So he's 27, but like his body's not beating up like a 27-year-old, right? And you know how I feel about last year contract people. Because if he wants the big deal, then he's got a ball next year. You play a mid next year after playing half the snaps in 2024, can't ask for big money in the offseason. But if you go out there and put up 10 to 12 sacks, 40, 50 pressures, tackle for losses, hey man, you may have secured yourself a contract, especially given our interior D line is not the high point of our defense. It could be something there. So if I was making a case, I would say this would be a good move. Because then by bringing him in, that changes our draft strategy immediately, right? We, at this point, got to think first or second pick. You got to go pretty big on defensive line. I would think O-line, D-line, back to back. If you bring him in, you can maybe push to the third or fourth round for the O-line pick. You know, I think that changes the math a little bit because you're not desperate for D lineman. And just like most drafts, really top heavy, and then that drop happens where it's like that's a day one, day two person, and it's like day three and beyond where you could be a fourth round pick or seventh. It can just fall off a cliff. I think he'll be a good pickup. I don't think he'll be expensive, and I do think he has a lot to play for and a lot to prove. I'm here for it. I would make the case that we should, in fact, do this. Case or no case number two. Should the Dolphins trade for Greg Newsome II? He's a cornerback for the Browns. Really solid early on. Started with Denzel Ward, who I think is great. And then over time, lost his job. Became kind of a nickel corner. Really more of a hard-hitting corner than he is a super cover corner. He's been here for 4 years. He has 3 picks. 3 picks in 4 years. I don't know what to do with that. I'm not here for the 1 pick a season average. That tells me you're not really either one or two things. Either you're not getting targeted at all, which doesn't make sense because you have Denzel Ward on your team, so I know he's really being avoided, or ball skills ain't there. It's almost impossible to play 4 years and just get 3 picks when you actually get burned on the field. It's just such a randomly low number of stats. I actually think Greg Newsome is a solid player, though. I've watched Cleveland play because their games are on sometimes. I don't know what's going on. So I've watched them play. I think I like a lot of guys in their defense actually. I just think they're just a cluster bleep of an organization. Just not good. But the problem for Greg Newsome isn't just that he's only had 3 picks in 4 years. It's that he was bad last year. Not, okay, coach, you didn't give me the burn. He wasn't good. All the pro football focus, all the cornerback rankings, terrible. One of the bottom corners in the league. Definitely his worst year. And if we trade him, he's 13 plus million against the cap. Absolutely ridiculous. There's no way. No way. You can't have a cap hit comparable to Jalen Ramsey while being a bad corner off your last year. I cannot make a case for this. I don't understand it. I saw it, and I just was like, why would we even consider? He's not better than Kader Kohu right now, who's making $3 million. Technically, he hasn't signed it yet, but 3.3 million, whatever. He hasn't signed it, but he's going to. You can't convince me that he's a better player than him. You can count 4 times against the cap. What are we talking about? Especially when you're a cap strap team. This makes no sense. I can make no case for it. I guess it's cool to speculate. No, I cannot make a case for this. This does not make any sense to me. Finally, case or no case. Should the Dolphins trade Tyreek to Carolina? Now, some of y'all are like, we love Tyreek. Of course we do. But let's think outside of the normal I like. Carolina has not figured out their number one receiver situation. They drafted Xavier Legette, who I think has upside, but he feels more like a Deebo Samuel type to me, which means he's more all-around gadgety than he is number one receiver against number one corner, go make a play. We saw him definitely sell against Philadelphia this year. Woof. Ball here. Not here for it. Straight through the hands. Took an L. Now, could Philly have gone out and made a game-winning field goal? Perhaps. But definitely Xavier sold. Just terrible play. Adam Thielen is 96 years old. Still actually not bad. Pretty okay in fantasy. Sanders is an okay tight end receiver hybrid kind of guy. They don't have a number one person that's like, that's the dude, right? I like Bryce Young. I know he's been it's hard to defend his whole career because there's been games where I'm like, does that guy belong on the field? And games where he looked really good. I thought, especially the second half of this last year, very solid, good against good teams, not getting a ton of help on the offensive line, not getting a ton of help at receiver, and just gritting it out. He just was gritting it out. You put a number one receiver on Carolina, that changes their whole offense. Now Xavier can go to the 2. Not nearly as difficult for him. They can maybe lean on the run a little bit more. I thought Chuba was really good for them this year. The O-line is actually pretty good at run blocking. Not great at pass blocking, but also if your receivers are middle of the pack, they could be blocking well. I mean, guys just aren't getting open, right? I think Tyreek makes a lot of sense for them. They have plenty of money to spend, so there won't be a money issue for signing Tyreek. They're not paying Bryce for another 2 years, maybe at minimum. They could probably push even to the 5th-year option. They're not paying Bryce. None of their receivers are getting paid. They spent money on the offensive line, which is cool. D-line has spent some money. Just gave JC a ton of money. But they have money for Tyreek if they want him. Now, let's flip it. Why would Miami do this? In this particular scenario, the Dolphins would get a 2nd and a 4th-round pick for Tyreek. That's pretty good. We're talking middle of the 2nd round, near the top of the 4th-round pick. 2 and 4 is really good assets, especially in this kind of draft that has a lot of depth at certain positions we need, right? They're not super top heavy in receiver. I think receivers fall off the map at receiver 4 or 5. There's no wide receiver 9 that's, this guy might change our life. I don't see that in this particular draft. But if you give up Tyreek, you would have to draft the receiver pretty early. So maybe in the middle of the 2nd round, it could be one of those top 4 or 5 still on the board. You can do that. And then with an extra pick, fortify D-line, secondary, O-line, what have you. Also, you get Tyreek's cap off of ours. Big savings. Now, take the draft picks, reinvest in the team. You get younger, cheaper, at a lot of key positions. And we can figure out over the next couple of years who can stay and who can go. When people are expensive or you're going to get free agents, money is being shelled out. And we're expecting you to be good right now. You get a 4th-round linebacker, first year could be a special teamer. 2nd year, rotational guy. 3rd year, this guy's starting. But for 3 years, you're not paying him any money. You go out and get you a linebacker, money, and assets, right? So the difference in that is, yes, it gives us more long-term flexibility. It's much easier cap-wise, and then you can make other decisions like, hey, we have a couple guys behind the starter we think is pretty good. So if a starter's like, hey, I'm holding out for money, go ahead. Because the guy behind you we think is just a notch below you, way cheaper. So it definitely makes the team long-term more valuable. It's going to be bad in the short term, but that's why we drafted Jalen Waddle 6 overall in his draft. Hey, Jalen, can you be a 1 now? Let's change it around. Hey, Nick Westbrook, you were 3 or 2 at various times. Can you really be a solid 2? Is Malik going to be there? Do we need to draft a third receiver? It gives you options on how to repopulate the team, basically. And, again, it's much better financially going forward. I think you can easily make a case for this. I'm not saying that we should do it. I think the case is clearly there that it can be made. It makes a lot of sense for the Panthers. Makes a lot of sense for the Dolphins. It might make ticket sales to the game a little rougher if he's not playing. Definitely less drama on the internet. But as a football trade, I think you can make a good case for it. But as always, guys, thank you for allowing us to make a case for you to be tuning in to Dolphins Daily. Hopefully we pass the case. Nah, that didn't end well. I was like, we passed the... Nah, it didn't end well. But we appreciate all the love and support. Thank you guys for liking, subscribing, all that good stuff. We'll see you next time on Dolphins Daily. Peace.